so crazy. Like when you talk about like health and stuff like that, what is right? I've been trying to like read books on just some health stuff and some fitness stuff. And like I don't know what's right. I don't know what's wrong.
So you probably won't want to hear this. Get the TB12 book.
I have it.
Book. Read it.
I have it.
It's been doing it for how many years?
All the pliability and all the...
Not a big believer in the pliability.
Okay.
Not that I'm not a believer. There's a time and a place for everything.
I think his recovery is most important.
Tell me what he does every night.
His recovery.
He sleeps at least 8 hours every night.
Yeah.
If you dive into the book, he doesn't eat any foods that cause inflammation. Doesn't do it.
I was just talking about that with Marcy.
Find foods that don't cause inflammation, right? There's foods out there. We don't know that.
I was just talking about that with Marcy. She just got back from vacation. And she's like, yeah, I've been having knee pain this week. And I'm like, you got to flush out your system.
Well, if you're an athlete, you're considered, in my eyes, a 24-hour athlete. And what does that mean? If you're going to play a sport, take care of yourself. Ask your kids when they come in here, who slept 8 hours last night? You may have one or two.
None.
Where their parents are going, you're going to bed.
Yeah, maybe the young ones.
I have about 125, 130 kids every week right now, and I can tell you the kids that get 8 hours of sleep or more a night. I have a Amherst soccer team. I actually have two, an A and a B team. Uh-huh. What age are they? I think they're U13, U14. I can tell you the kids. I ask them every time they come in here. I have one kid that sees me at 11 o'clock in the morning, and she's going to bed at 4 a.m. in the morning. Oh. What time did you go to bed last night? Oh, I went to bed early. What time did you go? 1:30? Well, that's early for me. I'm like, do you guys not understand how important sleep is, especially at their age group? Because from 13 to 16 in females, what are they doing? They're going on a different voyage than guys. It's when they grow, right?
Yeah.
That's when their menstrual cycle starts. Everything changes in their body. They need sleep. When do we grow? When do we recover?
Yeah.
When we sleep. We don't grow when we're up. We literally grow when we're sleeping.
Yeah.
So if we're not sleeping, minimum, you look anywhere, minimum 8 hours. Minimum.
I have a girl that's going to Cornell, and she said that was the biggest benefit from COVID. She sprouted during COVID because they didn't have school, so she was sleeping 8, 9, 10 hours sometimes, and versus her normal 6 hours or whatever. And then all these people, that like pride themselves on, oh, I only sleep 3 hours or 4 hours.
You're an idiot,
yeah,
and
exactly.
I tell all of them, you're stupid.
Yeah.
You're stupid. That's just dumb. Pick up any article on sleeping. There's a book, get it. It's called Why We Sleep.
I've already read it.
Right?
Yeah.
Guy's got 30 years of research, and he said, in the last 10 years, 15 years, we're just now understanding why we need to sleep.
Yeah.
Like, we haven't even touched on it, but we have to sleep. You remember in the book, I think maybe chapter 5 or 6, when he talks about these professional teams going overseas to play.
Yeah.
Stupid. They can't recover from it.
Yeah.
They're not there long enough for their bodies to change to it. If you lose 6 hours, you can't make it up.
I thought I had it in here.
Can't make it up.
I must have it at home. Yeah, exactly.
Why we sleep.
Yeah.
There's a reason why we sleep.
What other books? What other books do you recommend? I'm reading the Steve Magnus book. I've read Why We Sleep. I have TB12. So what do you think about like all the band work and stuff like that versus weights?
There's a time and a place for everything.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Should our 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids be using that? My opinion, no.
They need to be lifting weights.
Body weight.
Or body weight, okay.
We can talk about it. My philosophy is different. It's no longer. I just had a talk with my dad on the way over here, and it's no longer, about kids developing anymore. You asked that question, right? It's all about how can I get my kid on the best team.
Yes.
That's what it's about nowadays. I just had a light bulb moment listening to his dad, and I love this kid. I've been working with this kid for 3 years now. He's 14 years old. But we're talking about the best of the best teams. He just tried out for this USA Elite Hockey level camp or something at Oswego. There was 50 kids, the best of the best in Western New York, 50 kids there. And he's on the bubble. Where are all the best of the best kids? Well, I mean, it's night and day. If you look at it, another thing is Outliers. Did you read Outliers?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's right over there.
So, crazy book, and it falls kind of in that development. Everyone, now probably started maybe about 15 years ago, this long-term athletic development in ID camps, right? Total BS. Total BS.
Yeah.
So if we look at my hockey kid that's 14, and I have a kid that I'm working with that's in the same age group playing hockey that's 13. He falls off. My 14-year-old was born in January. My 13-year-old that plays at the same age level was born in December. So when you tell these kids, my 14-year-old has a whole year of development on this 13-year-old kid, right? But they're on the same team. Well, they got to be doing the same stuff. Well, why are they doing the same stuff, right? They fall in what I consider as a different developmental bracket. I say it all the time. So let's take our college athletes. Let's take my runner at Siena. She's a freshman. She's running with kids that are senior, COVID senior, COVID 2-year seniors. So these kids have anywhere from 4 to 6 years of college over this kid. But this kid's doing the exact same workouts, weight training programs as these seniors are. That's absurd.
I'm going to introduce you real quick. Ron Brissette, thanks for coming. This is exactly why I wanted you to come in here, all right? Because the first time that I came in, I tweeted something out. I knew of you because of Charisma, but I tweeted something out about any of you coaches tear your Achilles or something like that. And you were like, and you messaged me, you're like, come and see me. And the first time that I saw you, met you, I think you had me, who was probably 35 at the time. You had a soccer player. You had probably a softball player and maybe a football player.
Volleyball player too.
And you had everybody doing something different. It's somebody else, like everybody doing something different. Whereas where all these kids go for fitness, it's a one size fits all. I don't care if you're 45 or 15, you're all doing the exact same workout. And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I think that's why most of these kids get injured. And where did you, a lot of people would see your coaching style and say that's exhausting. I think it's probably lazy coaching to look at you and say, oh, well, that's exhausting type of coaching.
I wouldn't call it lazy coaching on the coach's part. It's what they've been taught. It's how they were coached. So it's kind of a domino effect, right?
Yeah.
And I say it all the time that I see college coaches coaching softball and baseball in the facility that I'm at. And what are they doing? They don't have their own coaching style. They're coaching the way they were coached. And it doesn't mean necessarily that they were coached appropriately. Coaching, I think a lot of people take coaching as a job, but to me, coaching is a profession. And to me, I'll kind of give you my background shortly on how I got into things, but coaching to me is like that 24-hour athlete, right? I want to be the best I can be. So in doing so, there's better ways to do things. There's a better way of coaching someone than being coached the way I was coached. I mean, I grew up playing baseball and I was coached by my dad. My dad, a teenager, had gotten a letter when he was in high school. He was recruited by the Yankees. He's a very good baseball player, very good basketball player. Ended up going to the Army instead. But if you would ask my dad now, who's 84, he would tell you, I don't know much about baseball back then. He just coached, right? And I look at how I was coached back then. There is no way I would even think about coaching athletes the same way that my father and his friend coached me. And I had my dad all the way from T-ball all the way through Little League. So, I mean, he was my coach for years.
Right.
But there is no way that I would use that coaching style today based on how I was coached. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I just, I hate to use that term old school, but kind of that old school mentality that we're still in.
Absolutely.
Let me give you my background. So, 18, didn't want to go to college. I'm out of high school. I go into the Air Force. When I went into the Air Force, I had my 2 brothers, a sister, and a brother-in-law. We were all in the Air Force at the same time. Did 4 years in the service, said this wasn't for me. I got out, took a job for a year back in where I grew up. From there, didn't want to stay there. Moved down to Florida. Took a job in a warehouse, which is what I did. I was the warehouse manager, which was my job in the Air Force. Mm-hmm. And my wife now, who is a speech language pathologist, lived on the side of me. And I was toying about not knowing what to do, talking to her one day, and she was like, "Oh, we have a rehab tech position in our PT department that we have a spot for." And I'm like, heck, I always wanted to do something in healthcare, didn't know what I wanted to do. And literally, as soon as I walked into that PT clinic, I was there for probably about 5 hours, and I said, "This is what I want to do. This is what I need to do." So my wife, not being my wife, just a neighborhood, neighbor friend on the side of me, kind of set me on my path where I needed to go. And this guy that mentored me was like just phenomenal. So started working as a PT rehab tech, started going back to school to get what I needed to get into PT school. Got my educational background into PT. Got out, we were living in Florida at the time. The insurance component in Florida fell out and the reimbursement rate fell apart. So a lot of people were getting laid off where we were working. So my wife at the time was in her first trimester of pregnancy and came home one day and said, "I wanted to move back to my folks, back to Buffalo." And I'm like, we're in Daytona Beach right now. Back to Buffalo. But we made the trip. We've been here ever since. So switch over to modes. I come up here. I interview with this outpatient orthopedic clinic. Worked there for a year. Wasn't my thing. Wasn't really outpatient orthopedic like I expected it to be. A lot of older type clients. A lot of workman's comp clients that get hurt at work and they need therapy. A lot of no fault people that have gotten accident clients, and kind of just wasn't feeling it. So changed jobs with this other outpatient orthopedic clinic, and some of the PTs that I had in there were just phenomenal, taught me a lot. I was with them for about 7.5 years. And I had an opportunity to go interview for a job with a brand new facility that was physician owned. It was like the gamut of gamut. It was like unbelievable. So we had the orthopedic physicians, we had PT, we had OT, we had the X-ray, we had MRI, we had durable medical equipment all under one roof. It was great. Learned a ton there. While I was there for about a year and a half. I sat down with my supervisor and I said, "Listen, ever since I've been doing this, we've been seeing younger and younger and younger athletes getting injured. Shouldn't be happening." So I said, what I want to do is I want to start kind of volunteering my time, kind of tweaking around what we called back in the day injury prevention programs. And it took off. Volunteering my time, had basketball programs, started with some soccer clubs, started with some baseball, some softball teams. And it turned into me literally starting a sports training division inside of this company, which I did for about 7.5, almost 8 years. And at the time I decided to quit, it had grown so big that we were turning patients away because we didn't have space.
Right.
So I went home one day, told my wife, I said, "Listen, I'm taking a leap of faith. I'm looking for a spot on my own. I want to do this on my own. I want to do it my way." The unfortunate part, you very well know, is when you're working for someone, there's kind of rules to follow. And if they tell you to do something exercise-wise, even though you're kind of questioning it, you got to kind of follow it.
Yeah.
That's not my thought process. And what I saw down the way is what we touched on a little bit earlier, is you go into PT clinics, and all my clients that I have now that I'm reconditioning say the same thing. Oh, I'm in there for my knee, and everyone that I see that's in there for their knee, whether it's a meniscal, an MCL strain, an ACL repair, an ACL strain, they're all doing the same stuff. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I kind of fell into that hole back in the day where, yeah, you're right. You get caught up in being busy, and you get caught up saying, hey, it works for this one, it's got to work for this one, when that approach isn't right. It doesn't work.
Because everybody's bodies are different.
Absolutely.
And
age-wise, developmental-wise,
and
work-wise.
how they react to certain things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So programs took off. I ended up giving my notice. I opened up my own clinic, Brissette Sports Performance. And I haven't looked back since. So
have you been at All In the entire time? Have
been there the entire time. I was actually opening a similar facility like yours, but the lease fell through. It wasn't a good situation, and the people that opened up All In Sports were like, if your lease falls through, we want you here. So kind of blessing in disguise, right? Yeah. Everything worked out. But my approach is totally different. I don't, and we shouldn't. And I'm at the point in my career now where I tell coaches, listen, if your kid's working with someone from a sports performance standpoint, athletic development, strength and conditioning, and they're all in a group training, and there's all different athletes, and they're all doing the same thing, tell those people you want your money back and turn around and go find someone that's not doing that, because that's not athletic development. It's not sports performance. It's not sports training. It's a one-size-fits-all.
Exactly.
And that's not how sports performance works. We're all individuals. We're all different ages. We're all different sports. We shouldn't be doing the same thing. We shouldn't be doing the same sprint drills. We shouldn't be doing the same agility drills. We shouldn't be doing the same endurance drills. So I look at that, and I think that's the biggest thing that I offer in what I do, differently than everyone else in the area.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying what they do doesn't work, but there's no long-term athletic development component to that. There's no progression to that. And if we look at physiologically, what I learned through my career in school is that there's windows of opportunity for people. Can we get an 18-year-old faster? Yeah, we can do that, but it's just not sprint work. It might be working on range of motion issues or restrictions that they have in their ankle or their hip. It may be a strength issue. It may be something as easy as fixing their arm motion.
Exactly.
So when I look at those things, the hard part is having an individualized program for everyone. But the most beneficial and the correct way to do things is to do them correctly. So it's not a one-size-fits-all model when you come into my facility. And you know that just from having athletes or referring athletes to me. I have a handful of your athletes right now, and they're all not doing the same program.
And when we get them in here, we talk about that. We talk about what's different from you versus where they used to go.
Yeah.
And they all love it. They all like doing different things. They don't like doing the exact same workouts. Some of these coaches will do the same workouts every single week. You know what I mean? It's just...
Well, I see it. That's where we get into injury-wise, and I can bring up a couple examples as far as overuse injuries. We see it. The coaches know what they are, but they don't know what to do differently. Workout-wise, they don't know what to do differently, and that's where we talk about, coaches being coaches and coaching the way they were taught. I probably have about a dozen coaches that they get it.
Absolutely.
Get it. I can bring up my local high school boys program that I've been working with for the last 5 years.
Exactly. He knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing, and he listens.
Because he comes into you. But he's also a client.
Very intelligent coach. He's also a client of mine.
Yeah.
Funny story with that is his mom ran a daycare, and my wife's a speech language pathologist, early intervention.
Okay.
So she was always in this facility all the time. Yeah. And this coach had ACL surgery, so wasn't doing well in PT. Didn't feel like he kind of hit a brick wall. And his mom was talking to my wife one day, and my wife was like, You got to have him call my husband. This is what my husband does.
Yeah.
So great guy.
Yep.
It's been a phenomenal relationship ever since. He gets it though. He's one of the coaches in this area that gets it, that listens. When he first started out, what would he do for a warm up? He'd run his kids around the field a couple times. They'd get in a circle and they'd stretch. Well,
that's exactly what we did.
I've educated him and he gets it now. He sees it. Is like, that's not what we do. That's not a warm up. That's not an appropriate warm up for your soccer team. Stretching shouldn't be part of the warm up. You should be doing that at the end. And I can't tell you how many teams I see doing it. And there's enough research out there that if you just Google it, that I had told one of my athletes the other day that static stretches before their practice, that there's research out there that says that it takes away almost as high as 30% of your performance on the field when you get done stretching and you go out. So
absolutely,
I tell everyone, especially with a warm up, if it's slow and static and mundane, that's what you're going to get when you go out on the field. That's what you're going to get with your practice. That's what you're going to get with your games. But if we make it a dynamic warm-up and it looks and smells by the time we get done to warm-up, like soccer or softball or volleyball or basketball, that's what we're getting your kids ready for. That's what you're getting your team ready for. Static stretching doesn't get your team ready for that. And me personally, I think it actually causes some injuries of these kids that are playing.
Absolutely. And I was always taught that injuries that happen today were probably because you didn't stretch after activity yesterday. Is that it? Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I think more or less. A lot of the stretches that I give my kids, and I go back to it, it's individualized. If you see, let's just take a soccer team, they're all doing the same stretching at the end. Why my goalie is doing the same stretches that my midfielder or my defense or my strikers is doing is, it shouldn't be. I do a lot of team training and we kind of get into that, but it's very individualized. I might have two goalies that are doing two different stretching routines, but that's the way it needs to be. If we're looking at restrictions, and I have one goalie that doesn't have really good extension, that can't really get his arms up over his head, and I have another one that can, why am I going to give them the same stretching to work on extension or arm extension when one has really good range of motion and the other one doesn't? I'm not going to give them the same stretches.
Doing a different, tailoring everything to be athlete specific, was that from your mentor or was that from your formal education?
Yeah, it wasn't my formal education. I think that's one of the problems. And funny story is you go through your schooling and it's very generalized. But I think more importantly, if anything in the healthcare that you're going to get a degree in, that the exams that you take to get licensed are very manicured. So your program that you go through and get your degree in is very manicured towards your state licensure exam. Me, if I were to go through my PT program again that I was through, I look at it now going, how atrocious was it? And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I'm talking like almost 26, 27 years ago on how far we've come. But I have this gentleman who's a PT now, that got his bachelor's degree at UB in exercise science. Great program, very generalized. Got his bachelor's degree and he was trying to get into the PT program, got put on the waiting list, and then he went to Uville, got put on a waiting list there, and he was like, I don't know what I want to do. He's interned with me, started working part-time, was phenomenal. So now he gets the call from Uville saying, hey, we have a spot open for you if you want it. So he calls me up. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, go do it. Get your PT degree. With the understanding that everything that I taught you isn't going to be taught in your PT program. So, something as easy as standing knee flexion, strengthening the hamstring muscle, or getting on the hamstring machine at the gym where you lie down and you curl your leg back and you get on it. Well, good training tool, but that's not how our hamstring works. That's not how it functions. So him going in there, fully understanding, and he'd call me, and we still text, we still talk, he still comes in. He's a PT now, but it was like, oh my gosh. You learn more on-the-job training than you do in the classroom.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Getting back to the hamstring, and I see it all the time. One of the Instagram videos that you liked, and I looked at it, and I'm like, what the heck is Jason liking this for? But a lot of these coaches, the flavor is it looks good when you see your kids doing it.
Absolutely.
But if you understand motion and you understand how the body functions and how there's synergy between your index finger on your right hand and your big toe on your left foot, and if we understand how these muscles correlate and they work together, we wouldn't be doing half of the nonsense we do in our training programs. I think the video that you liked was there was an athlete jumping over these 6-inch hurdles, and then all of a sudden at the end he jumps up on this 40-inch box. And I had texted you.
Yeah.
Because we have some pretty good conversations text. I texted you that, that doesn't have anything to do with soccer. And I think, you were kind of like inquisitive, like you're on. You're like, well, what are you talking about? And then I sent you that picture. I sent you of a picture doing a vertical jump, a kid jumping up, doing a vertical jump, and his body's in full extension.
Versus shrunk down.
And, to me, my comment to you was, wow, the kid has really good hip mobility and good knee flexion. But if you look at that picture of the one that I sent you of the kid doing the vertical jump and extension, he may not be vertical jumping 40 inches. He may be vertical jumping 22 inches. But his hips are a lot of a heck higher than that kid jumping on that 40-inch box.
Uh-huh.
So to me, there's not a lot of translation of a box jump, and I don't really think people understand why people do box jumps. I think it became very famous in the CrossFit world, box jump, but we don't understand why we do it. To me, the only time I use a box jump in my facility is to unload an athlete.
Coming down?
Yeah, so let's look at my volleyball athletes that I work with. They jump all the time.
Yeah.
They jump in practice, they jump in games, right? So when they come into me, do I want them to jump more? No, not when they're in season. So in order to unload them is I'll have them work on their format if that's what we need to work on the program, and work in getting into extension and having good arm position. But what that box allows me to do is take off a lot of the landing pressure and load in their joints. So if they jump up onto a 12-inch box, they're not slamming their legs and they're not getting a lot of stress in their ankle, knee, and hip joint. That's the only reason I use box jumps.
So unloading, you mean off the box jump, but is there unloading with running? Because all these soccer players are training 3 times a week, sometimes 4. So if they're in season, they're not doing a lot of running.
Season. No.
Now, if you're working with somebody that's about to go, say, start a pro career or a pro season, that's when you're ramping up their running.
There's a time and there's a place for everything. So, yeah, you kind of hit one of my sore spots, because that's all these coaches. I don't want to say all these coaches, but a lot of these coaches don't know that nowadays, and I got to say, sports isn't like it was 25, 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. If you look at when I was in high school, we didn't have travel sports.
No.
We had seasonal sports. So when I talk about a multi-sport athlete, I'm talking about a kid playing football in fall,
basketball,
a kid playing basketball in the winter,
baseball,
a kid playing baseball in the spring, or lacrosse in the spring, or outdoor track and field.
Yep.
And the summertime for me is the ideal time to get these kids sprinting, running, jumping. And it's not that we don't do it when they're in season, but my percentage of what we do from a sprint standpoint totally changes. Now, if we get into a little bit deeper depth about that, I just had the awesome opportunity to work with one of our professional teams here locally this season. And when we talk about load management, I don't think anyone really understands it from a coaching standpoint. I'll even say from a PT standpoint, from an athletic training standpoint, some of them do. I have a handful that understand it, but I'm going to say the majority really don't understand it. That, you know, if we have a team and we have our starters that start all the time, what are we doing with the kids that are on the bench that aren't starting all the time? They're running, they're sprinting, they're doing agility work. Mm-hmm. So there's me, I use load management with my younger kids in a different terminology than it usually is. Okay. Usually when you hear load management, it's more in the weight room of what they're doing, when they're doing it, how they're doing it, what time of season they're doing it. But I'm in load management with my athletes year-round because kids are playing year-round now. I have male soccer team that's in with me right now that's playing travel soccer that had a game last weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yep. And they were playing some very high-level teams. Do I run them? No, I don't run them. We do a lot of recovery work when I see them on Thursday, and then I'll see most of them again on Saturday, depending on what they're doing. But my life is a lot of load management when these kids are in season.
What do you think of mid-season fitness testing?
Absolutely not. Well, I can't say absolutely not. It depends why.
Like beep tests.
Yeah, fitness testing has become a serious business, and there's opportunity for growth in that, but I don't think a lot of people understand what to do with the data. We have a local team here, and I work with a handful of their kids at the college level. It's kind of interesting because they all bought GPS monitors one year, and then they went to the heart rate monitors. And I can see looking at it, but I don't think they really understand what to do with the information. And I don't say that disrespectfully, but if we have a heart rate monitor on this team and they play a low-level team, their heart rates aren't going to go through the roof.
Right.
You know, they're going to be demanding the game. They're going to be able to do what they do. Versus playing a team that is better than they are, they're going to be running around the field forever. So what do we do with those two different games with the heart rate monitor or the GPS that we're looking at? Right? They're going to be totally different.
Yeah.
So how do we maintain that? You know, on a light day, do we increase it? On a heavy day, do we decrease it? To me, that's common sense. That's what we do. I even go as far as GPS, and this is silly because everyone talks about even before GPS became popular, what does the average soccer player do in a game? Oh, they run 4 to 6 miles. Yeah, no, they don't. Even though the statistics out there that they're moving for 6 miles.
Moving, yes.
They're not running for 6 miles.
Exactly.
They may be, and I'll tell you if my if my mind's working properly. So high school on average, and I'm not saying every high school team, I'm just saying average. There's data out there where, you know, 25% of the time or less, our midfielders and our strikers or forwards, they're running max runs, and that's kind of high. 25% is high. Most of what they do in a game, and we're talking those two positions, percentage-wise, very high percentage, 70 to 80%, somewhere in there, that they're running somewhere between 70 and 80% of their max run. Okay. Now, if we look at our defensive players or we look at our goalies, what do our goalies do?
Yeah.
They never sprint. Very rarely do they sprint.
Right.
And if we understand sprints, we don't get up into our top-end sprint probably about 20 meters, 25 meters out.
Yeah, and a goalkeeper shouldn't.
I never see a goalie running that distance. So what do we do with goalies? We work on acceleration. We work on agility, right?
Yeah.
We work on acceleration drills with them. That's what I do with my goalies. When we look at defenders, does a defender on a soccer field ever run 20 yards, 25 yards, meters, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah. And going back to the in-season program, like with all the different athletes that you work with, how many are overworked? How many are doing too many sessions, too many games, too many, I almost feel bad when kids come into me when they've had 2 games on the weekend, they have their club practice 3 times, and then they try to get into me like 2 or 3 times. I'm like, no,
Can't do it.
please just take a day off. Maybe you do 1 day with me, but then I'm going to make sure that I don't kill them.
Yeah. So with me, I'm almost in the same world. It's a little differently if we look at the science and the physiology and what athletes should be doing in season. For every 2 to 3 practices or games, they should be doing a strength training program.
Okay.
Now, the big question mark is what should that strength training program look like? I'm not going to get into details because it all depends on the team, where they are in the season, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
But physiologically, science-wise, for every 2 to 3 practices, the team should be doing a strength training program. So do the math on that.
Yeah.
Right? So if we have a school soccer team and they're practicing or playing 5 or 6 practices or games a week, they should be doing 2 strength training sessions per week.
Yeah.
And you should fit that in. We do it with the teams that I work with. What does that strength training look like? Most of it's not weight training. Most of it's body weight training, which is where I feel the majority of these kids in high school and middle school are lacking because we're so quick to put weights in their hands and I got to get stronger. I have a softball team that I'm working with right now, U12. Probably 10% of the time they have external resistance in their hands, whether it's 7.5, 10-pound dumbbells or a 6-pound med ball. Just about everything I do with them is body weight training.
Yeah.
And right now I'm seeing them 1 time a week. I just had the team in last night and I had 4 girls go, Coach Ron, look I have muscles in my arms. And I'll look at them and go, and we haven't used weights. So people don't think you can get strong or get definition or get bigger without weights.
You're right.
But you can. You can. Again, it's what we're doing and why we're doing it.
So I used to be the coach that before every water break, you're going to do some type of fitness. I don't know what changed, but like 2 or 3 years ago, I was like, you know what? These kids are getting enough fitness throughout their week, so I just don't do that anymore. And I realized that what I was doing was probably hurting the kids. Like I would jump over the ball and then basically do like a burpee. And a burpee is like one of the worst things you can do for like
Jason,
your shoulders.
You were one of those, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Because I used to think that parents like to see kids have to, suffer and do planks and do all this stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute. It's like, is that making them better soccer players?
Here's my issue with that. My number one issue is everything I do is I'm trying to teach these kids the right way to do things. There's a right way to squat. There's a right way to lunge. There's a right way to hop. There's a right way to jump. There's a right way to do a push-up.
Mm-hmm.
If we look on the flip side of that, I can tell you in my facility, punishment is push-ups with the teams that I see in there. Right? So when I look at push-ups and I look at the team doing 10 push-ups because someone did something wrong and none of them are doing push-ups right, that's more detriment to the athlete than it is good. It is.
Right.
To me, with the coaches that I work with, one of the things that I always ask them, and I'll ask you, so your athletes do some type of fitness training, or not even my coaches at the facility, some of my coaches at the facility that are practicing on the field that do push-ups, that I'm not physically working with those teams, I'll go up to the coach afterwards and go, did you make any mistakes in the practice? Oh, yeah, I make mistakes all the time. I didn't see you doing any push-ups. So I think a lot of what I see is if kids aren't doing stuff correctly or they're not listening or they don't do a drill appropriately, gotta do a push-up. Push-up's like the golden thing to do. But going back to what you were talking about from a fitness standpoint, if I was a soccer coach, I would be asking all my kids what they're doing. I have a group of volleyball girls that I work with right now in high school at the best volleyball program in this area. That I saw a video last night, and they're doing all this fitness drills and fitness exercises that had no rhyme or reason why they were doing them. They were just doing them. And what I learned was they were doing them for discipline. Discipline in what manner? So think I had one athlete or maybe two athletes in this video. Well, do these coaches know that they're working with me twice a week? Do these coaches know that they're doing another sport at school right now? So I talk about load management. Those two kids, like, you want to work on discipline right now, it's the wrong time. And what are you doing from a discipline standpoint? You're making them really hate to do exercises because it's disciplinary, right?
Yeah.
So to me, my world's kind of different. I can see a fitness component in soccer. And me, I would ask you, is there a time and a place for it? Yeah, there could be, but why are we doing it?
Exactly.
I always ask the why. Why are we doing it?
Yeah.
Right? Why do we have them jumping over a ball and doing a burpee?
Exactly.
Why do we have them doing that? Does it fit into your practice? Does it fit into your end goal to what you want these kids to accomplish? Or are you just giving them to do something because we need more fitness?
Yeah.
If it's the latter, I'd say don't do it.
Looking back, I feel like it was me trying to, I don't know, probably just put on a show. A lot of these coaches like to put on shows in front of parents. I don't care about that at all anymore. I could just care what the player is doing, right? But it's funny about how we use fitness as a punishment. And that's one of the biggest things in soccer that I can't stand. Like, if you have a bad performance on Sunday, bring your flats. I have a team in here that they rent the space and we train them a little bit. It's bad. And I'm hearing, like, their technique, their soccer IQ, just everything needs to be worked on. It's just and I hear the coach be like, hey, bring your flats on Wednesday, no balls. And I'm like, this isn't what these kids need. These kids need 1,000 more hours on the ball. They don't need to learn how to run. They don't need to, like, work on their fitness. And these soccer coaches devise these fitness plans, and it's how they were coached, like you said earlier. That's 100%, 100% spot on.
We have a lot of what I call YouTubers. My problem with that is, again, like, why are you doing it? To me, I don't yell at my kids. It doesn't do anything for them. It might be that, your parents dropped the kid off and they were yelling at your kid before they came into the facility and they're just checked out. You find that information out before you start throwing, disciplinary or punishment or me. I really think, Jason, in my heart of hearts, these coaches don't understand. And I've tried in the past, and I've been doing this now for 15 years. What I've learned is that most of the time when coaches coach, they're coaching the way they were coached, or they come up with a philosophy that they think is right because they've seen it somewhere else. But most of the time it's not. And I think coaches more are afraid to say, I don't know what I'm doing, or give someone a call. I mean, I have, in my facility, I had a baseball team of kids. This coach set up probably 15 6-inch hurdles about 5 feet apart, and in between them, he had these 20-inch, plyo boxes set up. And this guy, I think, really, truly believes that if these kids do this, they're going to get better. Mm-hmm. Well, I always say at that age group, you can give these kids anything and they're going to get better. But is it better for them, right? So long term, is it better for them? And what I saw on the field last night was these kids not jumping properly, not loading properly. Their butts were driving all the way down to the turf. We don't want to see that. They're jumping up on the box. 5 kids out of 12 hit their shins on the box. They can't jump. They don't know how to jump. Mm-hmm. There's no teaching. There's no coaching going on. And to me, an outsider looking in at this, these coaches don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to coach it. They don't know how to teach it. They don't know how many reps they should be doing, right? So all of that plays into the equation of what I do. I kind of call myself a generalist, but a specialist at the same time. Mm-hmm. I eat my job up. I love my job. I love the athletes that I work with, but To me, it's a profession. Most of these coaches out there are what? They're volunteer coaches. You know, they're parents that are coaching, or I see young kids that are graduating college that are now coaching and they get paid for it. They don't know how to coach. They don't know how to. I have a lot of college kids that are out of college that are coaching now, and they come to me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is hard." Well, you know, if we have a goalie that's been playing college for 4 years and they get out, now he's coaching a team. Does he know how to coach his defenders? Does he know how to coach his midfielders? Does he know how to coach his bench? And the answer to me is no. Yeah. He may know how to coach his goaltenders.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how to coach the rest of the team.
Manage a team.
So he's doing what he was taught to do, or he was doing how he was coached.
Yeah.
Me, if you're going to coach. It's a 24-hour job.
I think you touched on a lot there. One, learning how these kids' days went is vital.
Huge.
Vital. Some of the standardized state tests are going on right now.
Horrible.
Yeah, and you could just tell the kids are zombies, that they're completely checked out. I had a few months ago, I had a girl, walk in and she just had this blank stare on her face, and I'm like, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" She just started bawling.
Yeah.
And then she ended up telling me, what was going on, and it's like, how many of these club coaches put that time in with these individual athletes? Not many.
Yeah, I would say, and I wasn't, when I first got into this, I didn't realize, like, relationships are the most important thing. And what I've learned, I go back to Anson Dorrance at UNC, where back in the day, he used to coach the boys team and the girls team simultaneously, same season. And he found out real fast that you can't coach the females like you can the males.
100%.
Yeah. So, knowing that's a big bonus.
I know a lot of coaches that probably shouldn't be coaching girls, and they should be coaching boys.
Boys. Yeah.
And vice versa. There's some coaches that don't do well with boys and that should be coaching girls. I've always tended to be more of a girls coach for some reason. I don't know why. Because Anson Dorrance, I saw him speak once, and this has stayed with me ever since I heard it. But he was asked that question: "What's the difference between coaching boys and girls?" And he's like, "Well, you have 3 hours, but the main difference is females want to be led, men want to be driven." And that's stayed with me forever. You know what I mean?
Oh, well, I in my world, and I love male and female, but I think if you would ask just about anybody in my world who they would prefer working with, they would say females, because that's what they want. They want to be led. You tell them what to do, they do it. Guys, on the other hand, different story.
Egos.
Yeah.
Egos. They think they know it all very young. Yeah. Absolutely.
I have a 13-year-old male that's like that right now, and it's kind of cool in a way because he's very inquisitive, like he wants to know, but in the same breath, he's kind of telling you what the answer is, even though he doesn't know it. So if you figure that out, you know how to do it. But that's part of coaching. That's what I think is a huge missing component in whatever you do or whatever I do. And I get, volunteer coaches, but I'm like, no, if you're going to coach.
Yeah. Go
learn how to coach. Take a course. There's online courses you can take. There's another book. I'll get it to you. I can't remember it off the top of my head. I wish I could remember this gentleman's name I heard speak probably about 10 years ago. I think the book's called Coaching Better Every Day. Wealth of knowledge in this book. This guy, before he wrote the book, went around the world and followed teams, followed the best of the best, followed the worst of the worst. And the one thing that he came up with coaching is the best of the best have a culture. He talks about the All Blacks, the rugby team.
Yeah.
Read books on them.
Yeah.
They've been doing the same thing. Their uniforms have not changed since the beginning of time, but they have a culture. I can remember him showing videos of this team pulling up in a bus, and everyone gets off the bus, and that bus is as spotless as it was when they got on it. And they form a line behind the bus. I don't know how many people are on that team, but they literally form a line, and there's people on the bus, and the whole team's working, getting all of the luggage and the equipment off of the bus. There's literally a line, and they're passing it to one another, and it's going right into the locker room. It's great to see, but it's culture. You ask any of my college athletes, out of the number of them that I've worked, I can give you a handful of them that literally say they have a culture at the school. I have one that played very high-level volleyball, 4 years at one program and 1 year at another program, and she had a great experience at both schools. But the one at the 4-year didn't have a culture. There's no culture there. There's nothing. And then you go to the other school, and there's culture. It was the best opportunity she had. She had a great time there at that 1 year program, but it's culture. And a lot of these programs don't understand culture.
They try to copy
how to
culture.
format it or copy it. You can't do it. You
Like
can't
Anson
do it from
Dorrance.
year to year.
Anson Dorrance is the most copied coach in American
Yeah, and
soccer.
it doesn't
and
work.
it doesn't work everywhere else.
Yeah.
Because it's really, everybody thinks that it's coach-led. It's really player-led.
Yeah, it's athlete-driven. Yeah,
Yeah.
It is. And every year you have different athletes on your team. It's like what you and I do, what we initially started talking about, right, is athletic development and having individualized programs. Well, he does the same thing. He learned that real quickly with female athletes, and look what he's done with his team. But it's all about relations. You need to know the athletes. I think a lot of times that the coaches don't learn about their athletes. And I know firsthand that a lot of coaches that I work with, I'm like, hey, did you know this about this athlete? And they're like, no, I didn't know that.
Exactly.
That's part of the process. Learn to know your athletes. Hey, did you know this kid's got 7 kids in his family and he's fighting for everything he's got? No, I didn't know that. It's the little things. It's relationships, and I think that's what I've really learned in my process. Right, is that everybody's an individual. Everybody's coached differently.
Everybody has.
I might be really sarcastic with one athlete that I have in my group training, and I might coddle one, and I might get on another one saying, hey, you can do better. But I've learned quickly how I have to operate with these athletes to get what I want out of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think, especially in soccer clubs, I came up under following mentors, and I tried to get 3 or 4 top mentors in Michigan. Right now, I think that we're lacking proper mentors and coaching education and coaches looking out and helping develop other coaches. Instead, we have cultures, especially at the higher clubs that I've been a part of, because I've had it from both sides, where I'm at a small community club and I was young, wasn't confident, and I just clung to these mentors. But then I go to a giant club in Michigan, and it's all the coaches for themselves, and it's coaches bad-mouthing other coaches within the same club. And it's like, what? Aren't we all supposed to be on the same team, doing things together? Can I come and just sit on your sideline? And coaches be like, no, I don't want you on my sideline. It's like, what's going on?
Isn't that an organizational component, though?
Yes.
As far as an organization, and I hear it all the time, coaches are doing different things, saying different stuff, where if you have an organization, and let's talk soccer because you're the soccer guy. So if we have an organization and they have an A team and a B team, or a house team and a travel team, and they have 2 teams at each level, how many teams is that?
A lot.
Right, it's a lot of teams. So as an organizational standpoint, what I would like to see is these coaches should be meeting. They should all be sitting down. They should all be talking about what the other coaches are doing, what they're not doing, what works, what doesn't work, what we should be saying to our athletes. And again, I think that goes back to culture. Has that organization been around long enough to where they have a culture to where, no, this is the way we're doing it. When you come and coach here, this is what we're doing. This is what we believe in. whether it's this is what we're going to do with our U10, this is what we're going to do with our U12, there's a step process. And I think in organizational, there's a developmental process just like everything else. But I don't see it.
What do you do when the culture is toxic?
Well, that's kind of a catch-22, right? Because we see a lot of those athletes. Hey,
congratulations, you have a culture, but everybody hates it.
Well, we have a lot of those athletes, and the problem is, one, what organizations in this area do you know that have a really good organizational component that can get these athletes to the next level? Two is, if it's that toxic, I tell the kids, listen, there's red flags to me. And if those red flags are always there, turn around and run. Turn around and run. It doesn't help. I have a lot of athletes, and I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I had an athlete, and let's talk organizational, like athletic development wise. So I have this one female athlete that wants to play in college. She'll do whatever she needs to do to get there. Been working with her for about 6 months, maybe 9 months, and I think I have a good handle on what she needs to do from a relationship point with me, and how I need to caress her, how I need to talk to her to get her there. And every time she comes in, she's just down, like she doesn't feel like she's getting better. So long story short, you start diving into, well, what's your club doing? What are you doing? Well, they show up, they practice twice a week, they do this, they do that. At the end of the practice, this female's hearing from the coaches, well, you need to work on this. This is what you need to work on. You need to work on that, this, and this. Okay, well, how do I get there? Well, you need to come and do extra skill stuff with me on Saturday. It's going to cost you, whatever, $20, for the session. And then, they show up and they're not working on any of that. Everyone's working on the exact same skill work. So to me, we look at an organization that, do they know where they should be? Do they know what they should be doing from a coaching standpoint? Do they know how to get these girls there to the next level? To me, I'm a little biased. I really think the biggest problem, there's a couple problems, is that travel programs, it's become a business. Tournaments have become a business. School camps have become a business. We call them ID camps now, and they're camps. We know what they're there for. And I'm not bagging these colleges, but most of these colleges that run these camps, why are they running camps?
So they can pay staff.
So they can make money to pay for their buses, to pay for their food, to pay for their hotel rooms.
Yep.
And, we can call it an ID camp. And again, no disrespect, but that's part of the problem, right? But I get back to that organizational component to, if we're telling one kid they need to work on something and then they come in and they're not even working on that, they're just doing the same skill work that they did in their practices, that's an organizational problem, right? That's an athletic development problem. I think there's not much of a difference from what I do and you do and what these organizations or these club teams do from a culture standpoint or a skill standpoint or a development standpoint. I think we're very generalized in what our end goal is, but how are we getting there? I think that's the bigger question. And I go back to what I've said about probably the general coach in the beginning is do they really know how to coach? I have a lot of coaches. Well, I've been coaching for 20 years. Well, you've been doing the same thing for 20 years.
Exactly.
That's what you know. That's what you stick to. So it doesn't mean you have 20 years of experience coaching. You have 1 year of experience that's been done for 20 years. It's not a good thing.
It's not.
We can't coach kids the same way we were coaching them 20 years ago. Doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
And that's okay.
It's absolutely okay.
And that's what I think that's the hardest part for some of these coaches. Like, well, that's not how we did it. That's not how I got to be the player that I was. And I think that's a problem in of itself.
That's a big problem.
Because they're talking about what they did. They're talking like big red flag to me when a coach introduces himself. They talk about their playing career or they talk about who they developed.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, the girls had 9 coaches. Well, you were just one of 9.
That's the selling point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I talk about this all the time. So, do you know who I work with, other than the athletes that you know that I work with? You'll see once in a great while me put something up, but at the end of the day, I don't care. Do I work with pro athletes?
Yeah.
Do I work with some of the best athletes in this country, college, some of the best yeah, but who cares? That's part of the problem, right? That people are going to come to me because I work with this professional volleyball player or this professional hockey player. That shouldn't matter. What should matter is the end result. Am I getting these people better?
Yeah.
Are they playing without injuries? Are they staying healthy? Look at those. What does it matter? I mean, I have probably, I in my facility, when I started out, I've had kids come in saying, oh, I was at this place. They have T-shirts and they have, jerseys of people that they worked with. And to me, it's a selling feature. To me, I started a T-shirt wall. Mm-hmm. And what I do with my athletes is it's an earn the right T-shirt wall. I'm just not going to put your T-shirt up on the wall to say, hey, I work with this team, or hey, I work with this athlete. I think it's kind of cool when you walk into my area and you see two walls filled with T-shirts, right? But I could tell you a story about every single one of those T-shirts I have on the wall, and I can tell you that most of those athletes that are no longer playing their sport, I still talk to them. I still text them. I still call them. Hey, how you doing? How's your job going?
Right.
So I look at that and I think that that's part of the problem, though, right? Is that sports has become a business. I have organizations that all they want to do is put their kids in a D1 program, even though it might not be the best fit for them. That's a problem. Mm-hmm. Those kids aren't going to succeed there. Right? I mean, we have coaches all the time. I have them all the time. We have the best skills program in this area. Well, when I look at your skills program, you got 30 kids and you got 2 coaches and you have kids standing around for 10 minutes before they do something. Yeah, I don't know about that. So those are the things I look at as far as coaching. Yeah. Are coaches coaching these kids? Lines, and I made a mistake back in the day, lines. We have a team and we have lines. A lot of my drills that I do, whether they're running or agility drills, I do lines. Mm-hmm. I'll have 3 or 4 lines of that team. But what I've learned is I don't do lines just to do lines because it's easier for me. Everything that I do from a endurance or a sprint or an agility standpoint has a little bit of competition built into it.
Right.
I've gotten away from my timers years ago. Timers, to me, timing kids on how fast they're going. Uh-huh. I'll do it in the assessment.
Okay.
I may do it at the 6-week mark, or I might do it at the end, and I may not do it at the end. But I'll get a time somewhere along the way. Let's use my 300-yard sprint drill that I do. I'm looking for certain times for my college kids. They should be able to run, and I'm throwing it out there. It depends on the sport, but let's talk my soccer kids. I have soccer kids that are running a 300-yard in 52 seconds, and I have some kids that are running it in minute and 10 seconds. Who are my minute and 10 second 300-yard runners? Who are they, Jason? It's my goalies and my defenders. People are going to call me, what are you doing 300 yards with them for? You know why I'm doing it with them? Because that's what they're going to be tested on when they get back to their school.
Exactly. One size fits all.
It's not right, but I'm trying to bulletproof these kids the best I can when they get off to where they're going, because I know they're going to be tested in it.
Do you measure a lot? Do you measure broad jump and your vertical and 40 time and stuff like that? Or do you?
I used to. Totally gotten away from it. My volleyball athletes, we need to get a vertical. We need to get a one-step jump. That's all these colleges look for. Me, in my middle school and high school kids, and my college kids will even tell you, I don't care about the numbers. The numbers aren't the important thing in athletic development with the athletes that I work with right now. Their takeoff is and their landing is. If we look at injuries in volleyball players, if they're not landing on someone's foot, they're spraining their ankle because they're landing on one leg. I know the large majority of the time, you can't figure out how you're going to land until you hit the volleyball, but we want to get them on 2 feet as quickly as we can, right? So to me, it's more technique, and it's more teaching these kids the right way to do things than to jump, 9 feet and not land appropriately. Because what we're doing every time we do that is we're teaching bad technique.
Right.
So what are they going to do when they get on the soccer field?
Bad technique.
That's my biggest thing that I pride myself on, and other people in this area that are in the business that I'm in can say they do. But the videos that I watch, I just scratch my head because I'm not a numbers guy. And the sooner these people learn, the problem is numbers sell, right?
They do.
That's the problem.
And it's
people don't care what they look like when they're running. They just care how fast their time is. Well, I can get them faster. It's not about the time. It's about their acceleration. It's about knee drive. It's about foot push. It's about posture. It's about arm action. It's about head posture. So those are the things I look for. If I got some kid that, I test a 40 on and he looks like T-Rex running, do I got to test him again? I already know once I get him running better, his time's going to be better.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, so there's soccer coaches in the area that they live by fitness testing because it gives them a measurable to tell their parent you're not good enough.
Well, I think though a lot of these coaches in this area too, preseason, well, let's take soccer. I know a lot of these coaches will time these kids to weed these kids out of the team. It's an easy way to do it.
Absolutely.
If I have 30 kids trying out for my soccer team and I have 23 kids that are running a 7-minute mile and I have 4 or 5 kids that are running a 10-minute mile, well, guess what? I can very easily weed those kids out.
Yep.
To me, I'm kind of looking at it like, you're going to weed these kids out a mile run? Like,
exactly.
If I have a lazy kid that's running a 7-minute mile and I have a kid coming in that's running an 8:30 mile and he's doing everything he can do to get better, give me that kid that's working.
Exactly.
Give me a kid that's working. I think coaches in general, I put this on Instagram and I think I put this on Facebook months ago because I was at a point where I was so frustrated with what I was hearing and seeing it from my athletes that sometimes nothing is better than something. And I look at that from a sports performance world, that when I have my kids over to me that I don't work with that are in the same facility with me that are doing garbage push-ups, it's not doing anything for them. I think in the long term, if they keep doing it, bad posture, bad technique leads to what? As soon as you stand up and throw the ball, bad posture, bad technique. If we fix that and we're not so focused on times and how many push-ups we do. So I use this analogy with my athletes. So they come in and I use rings for push-ups. I don't do push-ups on the floor because just about every one of my athletes, including my college athletes, they're horrible in push-ups.
Right.
So I get them in there. We start out at, call it maybe a 45 or a 35 degree angle in my rings, and we honker down on our push-ups. And as they get better form and they look better, we move them down lower, and we move them down lower, and we move them down lower. So eventually their push-ups are going to look awesome once we get them down to the floor level.
Yeah.
There's a process, right? I just, there's a process to everything. And I think another issue is that we're trying to find, and I think this is a big issue on teams in general, is that we have tryouts and we're just trying to find the best athletes, right? And we think the best athletes on our team are going to win championships. Mm-hmm. Well, I think if you're in my world or you're in your world, that doesn't happen. We can have the best team possible and they don't win a championship. Why? Well, there's reasons why they don't. I look at things differently. I've learned to look at things differently. My corner of the world, and I think what has helped me is my profession that I was in, being a PT and really understanding function and how the body works, and going into my profession now as what I call myself as a sports performance coach, is that's what I look at. We know it when we see it, and everyone refers back to the it. Michael Jordan had it, right? He had it before he went into the pros.
Yeah.
The pros didn't make Michael Jordan, right? His body grew into what it was from a developmental standpoint, whatever he was doing. We don't know what that it was. But when we see it, we know it. When we don't see it, we know it. But how do we get to the, oh my gosh, that looks horrible, to I want you looking like this? It's not about numbers. It's not numbers. You can run a 100-yard dash 100 times, and your time it's going to get a little bit better, but you're still going to look ugly doing it. And eventually it's going to catch up to you. Right? So I'm not a numbers guy. I used to be. I am from time to time in my assessments. I'll look at, if I do a forward anterior lunge on someone, what the difference is from the right leg to the left leg. You know, if we look at a soccer athlete, their kicking leg that they kick with all the time.
I'm glad you brought this up.
When they do a lunge assessment with me, if their right leg is their kicking leg, when they lunge, they're going to lunge longer on their right leg than they are on their non-kicking leg.
I actually got it written up there. Okay. So when I teach
flexibility.
So, okay, is this real? Okay. So, and I just kind of like made this up because I kind of just like learned it, or I just watch what their feet are doing. So I'll teach a tougher technique where the player's inside of their foot is pointed almost to the ground, and that's how you strike the back of the ball, and then it provides a different spin. Then I watched them do it with their weak foot, and they can't move their foot into their weak foot into that position. So I think that there's a difference in flexibility between a strong foot and their weak foot. Is that true at all?
Your body adapts, right? Your body adapts.
Because there's obviously, you know, like I hear all the time that in soccer players, like their right leg will be bigger than their left, or like their muscle. Is that
typically it is.
Okay.
You know, I would say with our younger age group, from a developmental standpoint, they may have a foot restriction. They may have a hip restriction. And there is a reason one foot looks better and one foot can get into position more so than the other. What's the restriction?
How important is hip activation? You used to have a pro player.
Listen. If we see, in my world, if there's knee issues, I don't look at the knee.
There's a hip
There's
problem.
usually a foot and a hip problem, or a foot or a hip problem. If we have a baseball pitcher or a baseball athlete that comes in with shoulder or elbow pain, I go to the foot.
So when I was at the Flash working with the pros, there was a player, and every single day she would have one of those bands, and she'd be doing these exercises that somebody taught her from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't our strength coach at the time, but I was like, "What are you doing?" Because I'd never really seen it before at that time, and she's like, "Well, it's hip activation, you know, to protect everything." And I think in warm-ups, that's like what kids should be doing in warm-ups, not that static stretching that we talked about earlier. Everybody should get a band around their legs.
Well, I have different thoughts on that. But if you look at every middle school or high school team and you see them on the sidelines using mini bands, they're working with me. Here's the reason why I do it. One is it's part of the warm-up. One, that mini band, unfortunately, for most of my middle school and high school kids, when they start with me, is a strength program, and it shouldn't be a strength program. I use activation lightly. What I'm really trying to do with that mini band is facilitate as many muscles as we can to work efficiently as possible, and get a synergistic, getting all the muscles linking together.
Right.
So typically, if we don't use a band and there's no resistance, and there doesn't have to be a heavy resistance band to get done with it. Everyone thinks, oh, black's the heaviest resistance. That's what I got to get to. That's not what it's about. So there's a few things I look at, and there's a few different styles that I use with the mini band. But when we use the mini band, that is the first thing everybody does when they come into my clinic. I won't get away from it. I have data over the 15 years, and my data doesn't lie. It's not skewed.
Do you have it
it's
around
data.
the calf or around the knees?
So, well, it
Or
depends. I like to see it around the ankles.
Okay.
The higher up, let's call it activation, the less activation on the hips. So if we think of where the resistance is, it's like lifting a weight. So if we could hold a dumbbell and we put that dumbbell on the top part of our shoulder and we lifted our arm up, that would be easy because it's closer to our body. Mm-hmm. If we take that dumbbell and we put it into our hand and we extend our hand out, now we have more resistance, right? So the further down that mini band is, the more difficult it's going to be. And I hate to use the word difficult because I don't want it to be difficult. I use the mini band as a step to the next step in my warm-up. So I'm facilitating getting the muscles not so much warmed up. I don't want to use the term firing, but working. We want all the muscles working as efficiently as possible.
Is your warm-up always the same?
No. No, it depends who I'm working with.
And it depends depends. Is it a running session? Is it a lifting session?
When I do my group training, where I'm at right now, it depends on the time of the year. But my warm-ups are usually generally the same.
Okay.
I'm just looking for a general effect to get heart rate up, to get the body warmed up, to get the joints warmed up, to get the joints lubed. Is it usually with mini bands? Mini bands are the first thing I do. After that, I go into a lot of coordination work. Skips, side shuffles, karaokes, lunges, hops, jumps, 2 feet, 1 foot, eyes open, eyes closed. That adds stimulation.
High skip? Did you say skips? Like
there's several.
We used to do
different
those
skips
all
I
the time, and I never see coaches do that anymore.
Well,
we used to call them Jamaican skips.
Yeah, well, here's the reason I use them. One, I have college kids that come into my facility every year that don't know how to skip. And the first thing I say is, if you want to run better and more efficiently and faster, learn how to skip. Mm-hmm. What is skipping? It's basic running 101. It's fundamentally setting you up and teaching your body what it should be doing. And again, leg action, arm action, posture, what your internal, external obliques, what your abdominal muscles should be doing, head action. So when we go through the warm-up, and ask the athletes that you work with, that I work with, mm-hmm. I'm looking for something out of that. Mm-hmm. I'm looking for technical components that they don't look good in doing. There's a method and a madness, right, for everything that we do. We want the kids to get better, but if we're doing a side shuffle and we have the lead foot turned out and we have our knees forward and we're leaning back or leaning forward, well, I want a ready stance position. I want these kids to be able to maintain that and move through it. They don't get that. I don't expect the coaches to know that. I expect the coaches to know whatever sport they coach. But in my world, athletic development's a different thing. And I get going through the warm-up. But if you look at my one high school coach that has had great success
Absolutely.
over the last 5 years, he's educated enough that he knows what I'm looking for.
He's taken what he's learned from you and put it into his team.
He can take the technical component if he sees a kid not doing a side shuffle right, not doing a low-speed karaoke right. He knows what I'm looking for.
Yep.
But we go from the mini band to the coordination drill, right, to more sports-specific stuff. If I have my softball or my baseball kids, they may be doing a 25-yard strider, and they're reaching down, replicating, picking up a ball. If they're doing a side shuffle, we're doing hand sweeps. So, yeah, some of it's sports-specific, but most of it I'm just preparing them to roll right into the session that we're going to do.
Ever use ladders in your warm-up?
I do not use ladders. I have them, and I used to use them. One of the gentlemen that mentored me way back in the day was a big speed ladder guy. There's a time and a place for it.
Okay.
Why would I use a ladder? It's more about what the athlete's doing with their feet more than what the drill's doing. Most of the time, the ladder is there to, run through
Quick
it.
feet, yeah.
The icky shuffle, 2 in, 1 out. Karaoke through. But I look at the ladder saying, when does my athlete ever do that in their sport? And the answer, more times than not, in the last 20 years I've been doing this, is not.
Yeah.
So Are there certain instances we could use the ladder? Yeah, but it's not a need to do for me. I would rather take that ladder away and use that skill without the ladder, right?
Okay.
So if you look at a softball and a baseball athlete,
Yeah.
what's their stance position?
Pretty wide.
It's really wide.
Well, infield, yeah.
Right? So I'm going to teach them that. I don't need a ladder for that. The ladder's there, more so for a female athlete to get their feet moving, to get them up. You know, if you go in a ladder, and most of the time it's females, is they'll hit the ladder. They like keeping their foot on the ground. So what's that ladder doing? It's working, and it's teaching them on picking their feet up. But as soon as they get that, I get them out of the ladder. I don't use ladders anymore.
Right.
I just, what I've honed in on, and there's skills, there's drills that I use,
Right.
that get them to where I want them to go. To me, I just think the ladder is very artificial in how we use it. It's very artificial on what I see coaches using it for.
Yeah.
And again, why are coaches using it? Oh, well, because Alabama uses it in their warm-up. Oh, because, Stanford volleyball uses it in their warm-up. Well, I go back to all the time. I won't mention the company that was here several years ago, but their logo was something to the effect, if you want to be a pro, you need to train like a pro. Well, that's part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I have a group of guys nationally that that's our text this last couple of weeks is development, and that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem. That's part of the problem is that we don't treat our middle school and high school athletes like college athletes, and we don't treat our college athletes like professional athletes. They're not a professional athlete. Mm-hmm. And again, I go back to what we talked about earlier is the developmental process. I have a coach at Oregon University, a strength coach, that when he gets his guys in back every year or girls in, doesn't matter what team, they start at point A. He resets the foundation. I do the same thing. I don't do it in a manner that he does it because I don't have all college athletes. But there's the important component of your athlete going through the whole season and them being done with their season.
Yeah. They're
worn out, their muscles are fatigued, they're broke down, their joints are sore. Well, do we just keep moving on? No. So there's a process, right? So when we go back to this, I go back to that ladder saying we really don't know why we're using it or what the rhyme or reason is. We just see other people using it thinking it's right, and it's not right.
Yeah.
I mean, I go back to, because I'm in primarily a baseball, softball facility, and the first thing a lot of these teams do is they put these bands up on the fence and they get these kids whipping their arms around. Well, my kids don't use bands, one, because they're not ready for it, and we went back to the whole Tom Brady trainability thing. There's a time and a place for it, but the coaches don't know how to use them. They don't know positions that these kids should be in. They don't know technique. They don't know sets and reps.
Right.
So if I have a kid doing 200 reps on it, I actually have a video of a kid doing 300 reps of band work all over the place for his warm-up. And now he's going through a warm-up routine, which is usually, 5 or 6 throws at 10 feet, 15 feet, 25 feet, all the way to 90 feet.
Yeah.
And then they get done doing that, and now they're on the mound throwing 300 pitches to their live pitching to their batters. So I kind of look at that going, load management. They don't know load management. But most of the time, I think these coaches are using these things, and there's no rhyme or reason. They're just looking at a video, and they're trying to plug something in. Not that it's a bad thing, but I go back to sometimes nothing is better than something in those examples.
Last thing I want to touch on, and it's something that we touched on with Carissima when Carissima was in here, is rehab. Is when a kid gets cleared after 6 months of, or after an ACL surgery, and is like, okay, cleared for non-contact, cleared for contact, and then as soon as they're cleared for contact, they think that they can play in games. And it's like, no, you can't. And these doctors clear them because it shows that the surgery worked. It doesn't mean that you're mentally capable of going out and playing.
So back when I started here, and let's take it to 22 years back, we were in a 6 to 9 month return to play protocol for ACL injuries.
Okay.
Well, and again, no disrespect to doctors, but some of the doctors for the evidence-based side of medicine says that the ACL is healed at the 3-month mark. That's evidence-based medicine saying that the ACL is healed at the 3-month mark. Okay, great. So your ACL is healed at the 3-month mark. Well, there is a local doctor here that 3 months. If you had an ACL injury and you saw 3 different doctors and you came highly recommended and you sat down with one doctor and one doctor told you it's going to be 9 months before you return to play. If you had another doctor tell you it's going to be 6 months to return to play. And then if you had another doctor say, oh, it's going to be 3 months return to play, who are you going to see?
Obviously, you're going to go to the 3, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, what we've since found in the last probably 10 to 12 years, evidence-based science, and this isn't me speaking, we have a 75 to 85% contralateral or lateral re-injury, meaning that these athletes either tear the opposite ACL or the same. Okay, so when we look at that and we look at all of the research that is coming out, these kids shouldn't be returning to play until about 1.5 years. Yes. And remind me, I'll show you a picture that I took that gives rationale why, but that's what we're finding. We're finding I'm not finding that. I have to say, out of all of the athletes that I work with, I've had 1, 2, 3, 4 athletes either tear the same ACL or the opposite side ACL. Can we blame it on the 3, 6, 9 month return to play protocol? You probably could.
What if one tear happens, let's say in 2022, and you take the 3-month option, and then 2 or 3 years later, you do your other one or the same one? Is it linked all the way back to 3 years ago?
From a neurological standpoint, central nervous system standpoint. To me, if we're seeing that, I would say no. We need to look at what they've been doing. I'll take a college athlete that I had that had a full ride to go to college. Very legitimate athlete. Was playing travel soccer. I think she blew her ACL out 2 or 3 weeks prior to her going off to college, practicing with her travel team. Went to the school, so she gets there in September or August. They're rehabbing her there. She's home for Christmas vacation. The dad contacts me saying, hey, I want you to do, an athletic profile on you. Can you take a look at her and tell me what you think? Now, I think she had the ACL done September, August, October, November, December. So she's seeing me 3 months post-op. Her trainers at her school said that she is about 90% ready to get back to the field.
Jesus.
I did some 2-footed squat test on her. I did some single leg squat test on her. She looked pretty good. I did a 2-foot hop test on her. I did a 2-footed broad jump on her. She looked good. I did a 2-foot hop test to a 1-foot hop test, and she fell to the ground. So
explain that.
So they're on 2 feet.
Yeah.
They hop off at 2 feet and they land on 1 foot.
Ooh, okay.
And she couldn't she couldn't stabilize. Her knee buckled and she fell to the ground.
On the injured knee?
On the injured knee.
Okay.
Yeah. So my assessment was done.
She's not ready.
I didn't do any running. I didn't do any cutting. I didn't do any agility. And if you were to look at her program, she was doing every cutting drill that you could imagine, every agility drill that you could imagine. And I said, absolutely not.
Back at her school.
Yeah. Well, they had her doing a home program. So I said, absolutely not. Stop doing what you're doing. Yeah. So me, I was generous enough, and I think I said she's probably at about 45, maybe 50%. And I think that was an eye-opener. But, we go back to our initial conversation when we started, Jason. Everybody's individualized. Everybody's an individual. And I have some athletes at the 3-month mark that are great. They're good to go. I have I have a college athlete right now that's on her second ACL. Her first ACL, I believe she landed on someone's foot, tweaked her knee, blew her ACL out. That was about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. She just did her second one, I want to say about 3 months ago. It was a straight ACL. I can't remember off the top of my head, same side, opposite side, but she has been in PT for 6 weeks. She's had 18 sessions. And she's literally doing nothing in PT. She's doing straight leg raises, all 4 directions. They have her doing some leg press on a supine leg press machine with lightweight. They have her hooked up to a neuromuscular stim unit, but that's really about it. She came into me last week, I think Thursday or Friday, maybe Thursday. I couldn't get her to squat on 2 feet to a 20-inch box.
And she's been in PT for how long?
18 sessions, 6 weeks. Jeez. So when I look at that, I look at myself and I'm pretty progressive in nature.
Yeah.
But I understand the process of an ACL injury and what the graft site looks like and what the ACL is going to look like and what's it doing. And when she came into me and did the squat, it probably took her about 10 seconds to sit on the box. But what I saw was she didn't have any ankle. She didn't have any knee. She didn't have any hip instability. She looked good doing it. It just took her forever to do it. Well, why? Her PT chooses to tell her every time she goes into the session that she's behind. So when she told me that, I said, well, you've been there 6 weeks, 18 sessions. If you're behind, it's because of the PT. It's not because of you, because you're doing everything that the PT's telling you to do. She has really good range of motion. She has full extension. She probably has about 130 degrees actively, 145 degrees of knee flexion passively. Functionally, we need about 120. So her range of motion's fine. She doesn't have any swelling. So, yeah, there's issues. But getting back to what you said ACL-wise, everyone's individualized. I have people at 9 months that I get. I have people that have spent 3 months in PT and have done a 5-month, medical step-up program that I get that can't do anything. And they're hopping and they're jumping. And I'm like, buddy, you can't even step up onto a box appropriately. So there's processes that we need to go to. Do doctors understand that process? I think they do. But if you get a doctor that says, well, you're going to be out for 1.5 years, do you think he's going to have any ACL business? No. So typically what I get a lot of athletes that are about the 5 or 6 month mark, or I'll get those athletes that are just getting garbage in PT and are sick of being in PT. That's a whole other conversation we can talk about. But there's a process. So, is it 6 months? Is it 9 months? Is it 1.5 years? No, I think it's a culmination of things. If you have the doc cleared you, and every time, we have someone that you referred to me that had ankle surgery.
Yeah.
And the doctor at the 3-month mark or 4-month mark said, okay, you're all cleared. And I said, listen, you're going to go and see this doctor and they're going to clear you tomorrow.
You're not cleared.
What I need you to do is ask the doctor to define what cleared means.
Exactly.
because they're not cleared to hop and jump and cut on one foot.
Yeah.
They don't have the
and
ankle range of motion.
And go and train with your team and do all that.
You can't do it. You can't do it. And I don't want to tell the kids that their foot can't be on the ball, but the risk at that point in time doesn't outweigh the benefit. And this individual that I'm talking about that we both work with together has time on their side.
Yes.
So I look at that. What's our time frame? If you're telling me a month, nope, I can't help you. That's how I am. Is it 3 months? Yeah, I can help. 2 months, depending on what you do and if you listen and if everything's going accord. But
yeah.
I won't tell my athletes, oh, it's going to be 2 months. Oh, it's going to be 3 months. I have a 13-year-old that had a triplanar fracture in his tibia. He's been in a boot forever. He just got cleared by his doctor. He's out of the boot. Like the dad's like, hey, when can he get back to skating? I'm like, it's not going to be this month. He has no plantar flexion. If we look at skating, you know, when you look at a power skate, you go through your heel all the way through your toe. Yeah. He doesn't have that range of motion. Don't put him on the ice.
My big thing is just like mentally. Like, I don't want a kid rushing out onto the field, having a super bad performance or a terrible practice, and then immediately their confidence is shot. Yeah. So I want kids training for almost like 3 weeks, a month and a half before stepping back onto the field, because I don't want that setback.
You and I have one of those kids.
No.
Soccer athlete, obviously. Mm-hmm. Badly sprained ankle. Mm-hmm. Was in PT for a little while. You got it or me. We got her better. She scored a goal, I think, to tie the game up. Was running back to midfield. One of her defenders came up to high-five her. She stepped on her teammate's ankle, sprained her ankle again, set her back. She was out for about a week. She bounced back quickly. Just saw me on Monday, and she says, "Oh, I just tweaked my ankle again." So there's some things you can. There's some you can work with. There's some injuries you can work with. There's some they're not. Do I prefer that she'd be playing? No, I think she needs time off, right? And she can practice, right? Yeah. I tell everyone, put the Tom Brady red jersey on you when you're practicing. There's a process. There's a process to return to play. You know, it's not you get discharged from PT and you go out and play. Exactly. There's a process, and people are missing that process. I think one of the components is, and I'm going to throw it back on the parents and the athlete, that they want it done yesterday. Well, unfortunately, our body's on computers, right?
We have another girl that you don't have, but their parents, she's going off to Cornell, and they were like, we want this to be at least a 10-month recovery. And I'm like, good. Yeah. Don't rush back. You don't need to.
What's the injury?
ACL.
Yeah, get her to me. Who's she working with? Well, it doesn't matter who she's working with. Here's the biggest thing, and I'm gonna pitch my services a little bit.
Absolutely.
People in the sports performance world, strength and conditioning world, athletic development world, the people locally here, they don't have my background. I know there's people that do, at one facility, he does high manipulation mobs, cervical mobs, thoracic mobs. He calls himself a chiropractor. He doesn't have a background in healthcare. Most of these people don't, and I'm not saying no disrespect to them that they don't. Do they know the body? They know how the body functions? Well, put them in the same room as I, and let's put them to the test. And I'll bet you my bottom dollar they don't. I'll set it up. So when bodies function and how they move, how a soccer player moves, how a volleyball player moves, I know the ins and outs. I know what to expect. I lived it. I've rehabbed people. I've rehabbed, you name the age group in ACL injuries. So there's criterias, very, very critical criterias when you're rehabbing somebody, what they're looking for. There's very critical criterias when we go back to, I call it training to train. There's a train to train phase. There's a train to practice phase. There's a practice to practice phase. And there's a return to play phase. There's phases. All these athletes don't know they're going through it.
I've never heard somebody say that.
Well, it's because
train to train.
We don't do it, right? There's
train to train to practice.
There's a rehab phase.
Yeah.
Right? So let's talk just ACL real quickly. There's a rehab phase. We now know, and this is science, we now know they can't go from rehab to go back to the soccer field. Right. They can't do it. They're not ready for it. No. So what do we do with them? There used to be this huge black and gray area between rehab
And playing.
Play. Well, guess what? That's what Brissette Sports Performance does. That's one of my, I call it a niche, but that's what I pride myself on, and I take it because of my background. Most of these guys, all of these guys in this area, look them up. Look at their backgrounds. One's got a business degree. One went, was getting his prerequisites through PT school and dropped out because he's working with this world-renowned sports performance athlete, and he knows a coach, and he knows everything. These other people that do CrossFit have their bachelor's degree in health and wellness or exercise science, but those programs don't teach depth-wise how the body functions, how it operates, how it moves. Here's a quick question for you. What's the hamstring muscle do?
Connects your hip to...
What does it do in the performance world?
In the performance world?
What's the hamstring do? What's its main job?
I cannot tell you.
It's deceleration. Deceleration.
Okay.
So, Jason, when you're out sprinting and you have to stop, you have to put the brakes on, that's your hamstring muscle.
What does your quad do?
Hold on. We'll get there. So the hamstring muscle the main job of that hamstring muscle is deceleration. Okay? Who trains that? Tell me someone that you know that trains that.
Deceleration?
Deceleration. A power clean does it a little bit. Squat doesn't do it. It's not hitting your hamstring. A deadlift will train the hamstring, but it's not training it in the manner that we're using it on the field, right? So if we know that a hamstring muscle is a decelerator muscle, how come we don't train that muscle the way it's used? We see people on what we talked about earlier, the hamstring curl machines at the gym.
Yeah.
We're not training the muscle in the manner that it's going to be used in performance.
Right.
That's part of the problem.
Okay. And yeah. Do you follow knees over toes guy?
Nope.
Okay. So
I can give you a million middle school, high school, college, professional athletes that are getting on a ball and their knees 3 feet over their toes. And I'm exaggerating a little bit. Do I do it in my training protocol? It depends on what the athlete looks like. Are they in control?
Do you do any like sled drags, walking backwards, running backwards? Any belief in any of that?
I do sled pushes. I do sled pulls.
Okay.
But again, it depends on the criteria of
the
what the
player
athlete
and
falls
the
under.
athlete.
Am I buying into it from an end result for speed work? There's an equation to it. Not most of my athletes, not my defenders or my
Right.
goalkeepers. I don't know why they need to push a sled or pull a sled. They need, our goalies need to go up in lateral. They
Right.
don't need to push a sled 20, 30, 40 yards. Very seldom. I have 5 sleds. Very seldom do I use them. Right now, I'm probably using them on 3 athletes, and they're all reconditioning athletes. I used them about a month ago. I was looking for a certain criteria in this group that I was working with. When we look at sprinting and we look at what the back leg's doing when it pushes, it goes into full extension. Mm-hmm. Well, I had a group of 4 or 5 athletes that couldn't get into extension. That sled was allowing me to teach them to get that leg into full extension. They could feel it. Once I use that sled as one of my drills or one of my tools, I now get them out of it and we do a 20-yard sprint. And lo and behold, their sprint's better. Do I do just sprint programs with my athletes? Nope. Do I do just agility programs with my athletes? Nope. There's a spectrum of what we need to do to get these kids better. Mm-hmm. You can sprint them till the cows come home. Isn't that what these coaches do? Do they get any better sprinting? Do their mechanics get better? No, they don't. That's all part of the program. That's part of a fully designed, appropriate program for these kids. We have a graduate soon to be, well, she's actually getting her graduate degree locally, and she's going to play pro soccer in another country. She leaves pretty soon. Mm-hmm. I don't need to do running and sprinting drills with her. Her cardiovascular and her sprinting looks great. You know where she needed work? In her change of direction. That's what we worked on. That's what we've been working on for the last month with her. She used to be this to turn, she'd be hopping all over the place to turn. Yeah. And I'm like, hey, If you want to get better times, we need to work on your turns and your change of direction. She looks great now. It wasn't sprint work that did it. It was her change of direction that made her quicker. It was what she was doing with her feet when she was turning.
And it's that easy. All right.
Easier said than done.
Absolutely.
But you need to know that my biggest takeaway from this talk is, and I go back to sometimes nothing is better than something, because you need to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it. You need to know how to teach it. You need to know how to pull it back. You need to know how to pull it forward. But that's what I've been doing for, God, almost 20 years.
And is building the relationship with the athlete to know when you can do that stuff.
Absolutely. Yep.
And that's the difference with some of these big box like gyms. I don't know if the relationship is there to really listen to what every single little athlete is going through.
In the gym setting?
Yeah.
Like you're talking like the local gym setting here?
Yeah.
No, I tell my athletes to stay out of them. Gyms are a $20 billion a year industry in this country, and these gyms don't care about who's in there and who they're training. They care about how many memberships they have and how much money is going into the gym. That's what a gym setup is for. They don't want memberships in there. The less people they have in the gym, the better off they are, but they want the memberships.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You're the
Anytime,
man.
man. Have me back.
Dude, Brissette Sports, baby.
That's right.
All right.
We'll talk soon.
See ya.